Let me ask you something. Have you ever seen someone being disrespected? Not loudly, not with fists or shouting, but in those quiet, cruel little ways that slice deep and leave no visible scars? Have you ever watched someone smile through it, just to survive another day? Before you hear what happened, just take a second and tell me in the comments. Where are you watching this from? I want to know. And if you love stories that reveal the truth most people try to ignore, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0, so I can make the kind of stories that you actually want. Fair deal? Now, picture this. It was a cold, rainy Tuesday morning. The kind of morning that makes the city feel quieter than usual, like the whole world had hit snooze. I was just dropping by to visit an old friend, my best friend actually. He's the CEO of a growing tech company downtown. Sharp guy, big heart. We've been through everything together. When I stepped into that building, it felt familiar. Polished floors, glass offices, the soft hum of ambition in the air. I've always loved this place. It's like a second home. I've seen it grow from a scrappy startup to something that actually matters. I didn't come looking for drama. I came to catch up, maybe grab a coffee, just enjoy a few hours with a friend I hadn't seen in a while. But within the first 15 minutes of being there, I saw something small, easy to miss. But once I noticed it, I couldn't unsee it. There was a new guy at the office, Liam. Deaf. Didn't speak, but you could feel the warmth off him like sunlight. Always smiling, always gentle, always watching like he knew more than the rest of us put together. And I swear, the way some people treated him, it felt like a paper cut to the soul. Quiet, dismissive, mocking when they thought no one important was watching, but someone was watching. And by the end of that day, they were all gone. This is Mr. Alex Stories, where we talk about the real stuff, the emotional stuff, the hard to talk about stuff. Subscribe if you believe kindness should always speak louder than cruelty, because what you're about to hear, it's not just a story, it's a wake-up call. After that moment, after catching just the edge of that cruel laughter aimed at Liam, I started paying more attention, not just to what was said, but to what was felt. You know how sometimes the quietest people are the ones who teach you the most? That was Liam. He moved through that office like he didn't want to take up space, always polite, always one step ahead of what needed to be done. I watched him one morning when an intern dropped a stack of folders on the floor, papers everywhere. Nobody moved. People just looked annoyed, like helping wasn't in their job description. But Liam? He was already on his knees, calmly gathering the pages. He handed them to her with this gentle nod and signed something. I asked her later what he said. She smiled and told me it was just, "You're doing fine." Another time, someone brought him coffee, not even realizing he couldn't hear their "you're welcome" in response. But Liam smiled anyway, placed his hand gently over his heart, and signed "thank you" with this kind of quiet sincerity that stuck with me the rest of the day. Like gratitude wasn't something he needed to say out loud for it to matter. It made me wonder, how many people go through life like that? Overlooked, spoken around, respected only in private, never in public. I asked my best friend, the CEO, about him over lunch one afternoon. We were sitting in the corner office, watching the rain roll down the glass walls. I said, "Liam, he's something else, huh?" My friend leaned back in his chair and gave this half smile. "He reminds me of you, when we were younger. Same eyes, same way of paying attention to things nobody else sees." That hit me. I don't even know why. Maybe it was the idea that I'd forgotten how to be like that, soft in a world that rewards hardness. Over the next few days, Liam and I started talking, in our own way. Notes passed between meetings. A few hand signs I Googled at night so I could say basic things like hello, thank you, or good work. He always smiled when I tried, even when I got it wrong. We had lunch together once in the break room, just the two of us. It wasn't planned. I sat down. He happened to be there, and instead of leaving like most would, he slid a napkin over to me. On it, he'd drawn a little cartoon of the intern from earlier, tripping and flying through the air, arms full of papers. We both laughed, not at her, but at the way he captured it. He had this soft humor. Nothing mean about it, just light. And then, one afternoon, out of nowhere, He handed me this tiny paper crane he'd folded out of a post-it note. I looked at him, puzzled, and he pointed to it, then to his heart, then signed slowly, "Peace." It was such a small gesture. Most people wouldn't think twice about it. But I swear, that little folded crane said more about him than anything else could. Liam didn't need words to tell you who he was. You could feel it, and somewhere along the line, he stopped feeling like just an employee. He felt like someone I should have known my whole life, like family. And that's what made what happened next feel so personal, so violating, so wrong. It started small, like a faint chill in a warm room, just enough to make you glance over your shoulder. One morning, I was passing the hallway near the kitchen, just grabbing coffee, nothing special, when I heard it. Laughter. The kind that's sharp at the edges, quick, mean, muffled behind cupped hands. 3 of them, mid-level team leads, I think, stood huddled near the vending machine, facing away from the hallway. One of them was pretending to sign something, wildly exaggerated. His fingers flailed like he was casting a spell. The others tried to stifle their laughs, but it was clear. They were mocking him. I froze. My first instinct was denial. Maybe they weren't talking about Liam. Maybe it was something else. A misunderstanding, right? Then I saw him. Liam was standing just a few feet behind them, quiet, still, holding a file to his chest, watching, not blinking, not moving. And then, he just turned around and walked the other way. No confrontation, no scene. He didn't flinch, didn't react, didn't even drop his eyes. Just walked. Like he'd seen this before. Like he'd learned long ago that speaking up only makes it worse. And me? I stood there like a coward. I wanted to say something. I really did. My throat tightened, my hands curled into fists inside my coat pockets, but I didn't move. Maybe it was just a bad joke. Maybe they didn't know he was behind them. Maybe I was overreacting. That's what I told myself, because guilt's easier to swallow when it's sugar-coated with doubt. I spent the rest of the day pretending I didn't see what I saw. But Liam didn't come to lunch that day. He didn't pass me any notes, just worked. Quiet, focused, alone. I kept looking at the crane he'd given me, that tiny, peaceful symbol sitting on my desk, and I felt like a fraud. I tried to talk to my best friend, the CEO, about it later that evening. But the office was glowing under warm lights, staff moving briskly with their polished smiles, and everything looked so perfect. He was laughing with investors, shaking hands, complimenting someone on their quarterly numbers. And for a moment, I wondered if I was the only one who saw the cracks. Everyone acted just a little too professional around him, too careful, like they knew when to smile and when to shut up. I realized they were on their best behavior around him. Always. And Liam? He didn't have that privilege. He didn't get to put on a performance. He just showed up as himself, every day. The tension started to sit in my chest like something left unsaid between close friends. It wasn't loud. It didn't shout. It just built slowly. Like air thickening before a storm you know is coming, even when the sky still looks clear. And I kept asking myself, why didn't I say something? Why didn't I defend him? What kind of man watches someone like Liam be mocked and walks away with clean hands? I didn't have an answer yet, but deep down, I knew. Silence wasn't going to protect anyone for long. The rain started just after lunch. One of those slow, stubborn drizzles that turns into a downpour before anyone realizes. It tapped against the windows like fingers drumming on glass. Soft at first, then urgent. I remember looking up from my desk as the sky darkened. It wasn't even late, but the clouds made everything feel like twilight. Inside the office, the overhead lights flickered once. Just a blink. Enough to make everyone glance up, then go back to pretending everything was normal. But it wasn't. Not anymore. I found Liam in the break room later that afternoon. Alone. No coffee in his hand. No sketch on the napkin. Just him, sitting by the window, shoulders rounded forward like the rain had soaked into his bones. In his fist was the paper crane. The same one he gave me days ago, now creased, flattened, crumpled at the edges like someone had held onto it too tightly for too long. He didn't look up when I walked in. He didn't need to. The air in that room. It didn't ask for words. It asked for understanding. I sat a few seats away, close enough to be there, far enough to give him space. I didn't say a word. Not because I didn't want to, but because nothing felt enough. Not even, "I'm sorry." Outside, the rain slid down the windows in crooked little trails. Inside, silence did the same between us. Later, during the team meeting, the room filled with that fake kind of energy people summon when they want to impress someone in charge. My best friend, the CEO, had just returned from a trip, and you could tell people were on alert. Smiling, more than usual, nodding faster, laughing at things that weren't even funny. But then it happened again. I caught it in the corner of my eye, one of the same guys from the vending machine. He was leaning toward the person next to him, whispering something with a smirk. Then, he started mimicking a voice. A soft, airy, broken tone, like someone mocking a speech impediment. The person beside him chuckled and looked down like they knew it was wrong, but didn't stop him. Nobody did. And Liam. He was sitting 2 seats away. He saw it. Of course he did. You don't need to hear cruelty to feel it. And then, just as the laughter was starting to grow, the door opened. The CEO walked in. My best friend. Clipboard in hand, scanning the room with that signature smile. He didn't notice the last echo of the joke still hanging in the air, didn't catch the flush on Liam's face, or the way that guy quickly straightened up and cleared his throat, pretending nothing had happened. But I noticed something else. Liam, sitting still, back straight, eyes low, lifted his hands and signed something to himself. Slow, measured, like a prayer. No one saw it. Not really. But I did, and I still don't know what it meant. Not exactly. But something about the motion. It felt like the kind of thing you do when you've run out of ways to say, "I'm tired." That was the moment I realized something had shifted. This wasn't just about work, or bullying, or bad behavior. It was about a man who showed up every day, gave everything he had, asked for nothing in return, not even praise, and still carried the weight of being misunderstood. He never wanted pity, never once asked for special treatment. He just wanted dignity, a place where he could be seen and not made into a spectacle. And as I looked around that room, at the people laughing behind their hands, and at the man I'd called brother for half my life, I knew something was about to break. Maybe it would be me, maybe it would be Liam, maybe it would be the illusion that this office was any different from the world outside. But whatever it was coming. After that meeting, I stopped lingering around the others. No more joking in the hallway, no more coffee runs with the usual crowd. I didn't want their laughter near me, not when I knew what it was laced with. Instead, I started spending more time near Liam. I'd sit with him in the break room, even when he didn't say much. We'd eat lunch in silence or trade notes on napkins. Sometimes he'd sketch a shape or a symbol, and I'd guess what it meant. I was always wrong. He'd just smile and shake his head like a patient teacher. And every now and then, I'd try to sign something, usually simple, like thank you or good morning. He'd correct me gently, eyes kind, never mocking. The way the others did him? He never did that to anyone. But it didn't take long before the whispers started shifting. Only this time, they were about me. "Looks like the CEO's friend is getting soft," I heard one of them say near the water cooler. He didn't know I was around the corner. "Probably just trying to look good for the boss," someone else mumbled. They laughed, low and smug, like kindness was a performance, like choosing compassion made you weak. It's strange how fast decency becomes suspicious when you're surrounded by people who wear cruelty like it's casual Friday. I didn't tell Liam what I heard. I didn't have to. He noticed the shift too. He always notices. One afternoon, after I'd stepped in to help him carry a heavy box out of the storage room, he signed something slowly, deliberately. I didn't catch all of it, so I asked him to write it down. He took the pen, thought for a second, then scribbled 6 simple words. "You don't have to protect me." Then, under it, he signed again. I'm used to it. I stared at the paper longer than I needed to. My throat tightened. There was no drama in his words, no bitterness, just a quiet, practiced surrender. I'm used to it. God, that hit me like a punch to the chest. That someone could walk into the same building every single day, knowing they'd be looked through, laughed at, pitied, and still choose grace? It made me feel small, and not just because of what others were doing, but because I'd let them. I'd watched it happen, maybe not always directly, but I saw the signs, and I said nothing. I kept wondering, is silence the same as cruelty? Is watching a knife get sharpened the same as handing it over? Why was I so afraid to speak? Maybe I didn't want to make waves. Maybe I told myself it wasn't my place, that Liam didn't need defending, that he was strong enough, but that was just me excusing my own cowardice. My best friend, the CEO, he still didn't know. He was buried in meetings, charity events, investor calls, always trusting, always assuming the best in people. I didn't want to break that illusion for him, but I also didn't want to stay quiet anymore. The tension inside me was growing louder than any conversation. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't shake the weight of Liam's words. And I couldn't stand in that office one more day pretending the kindness I showed him was special. It should have been normal, but I didn't know what to do next. All I knew was something had to change. For him. And maybe, if I was honest, for me too. The storm had gotten heavier by then. Thick sheets of rain streaked down the windows, blurring the city lights. Thunder rolled in the distance, not loud, but steady. Like a warning drumbeat you couldn't ignore. The office had emptied out early. Most of the staff had already left for the day, blaming the weather or traffic or both. But I stayed. So did he. We were in the corner room, his office. Big windows, warm lighting, shelves filled with awards he never bragged about. I used to love being in that space. It always felt like the safest place in the building. Like nothing dishonest could survive in there. He was sipping coffee, seated across from me in that brown leather chair he always said was too stiff. I watched the rain with him for a while, not speaking. My heart was pounding in my chest, and not because of the storm. He looked over at me eventually and said, "You've been quiet lately. What's on your mind?" I didn't answer at first. Just leaned forward, elbows on my knees, fingers clasped. Then I said it. "There's something you need to know about your team, about Liam." His brow furrowed, not in anger, just concern. "What do you mean?" And I told him. Not everything, not at once, but the pieces, the looks, the laughter, the fake signs behind Liam's back, the cruel mimicry, the smirks exchanged when they thought he couldn't understand, and my own silence. "I saw it happen," I said. "I saw them mock him. More than once. I saw the pain in his eyes, the way he swallowed it, smiled through it, and My voice cracked. I paused, took a breath. And I stayed quiet longer than I should have. I convinced myself I'd say something next time, that it wasn't my place, that maybe you already knew. But I was wrong. He didn't say anything for a long while, just stared at the rain. His fingers tightened around the mug, knuckles pale. I'd never seen his face like that. It wasn't rage, it was deeper, like a piece of his foundation had just crumbled and he was trying to pretend it hadn't. Finally, he whispered, "I always knew some of them were arrogant." He shook his head, voice barely audible now. "But I never imagined this." You could hear the betrayal in his tone, not just of Liam, but of his own values, of the culture he thought he'd built, the respect he thought he'd earned and taught. He stood slowly, walked to the window, watched the storm in silence. His reflection in the glass looked 10 years older. I followed him to the window, stood beside him. We didn't speak for a while, just listened to the sound of rain. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You know, when I hired Liam, I didn't do it to prove anything. He reminded me of us back when we were kids, the way he kept to himself, the way he worked twice as hard without needing credit. I thought this place would be good for him. I thought I'd built something safe." He turned to face me then, and for the first time, I saw doubt in his eyes. "If I let this happen under my leadership, what does that make me?" I didn't have an answer, because I'd been asking myself the same thing. The storm outside kept going, but now, it felt like the real storm, the one between us, inside us, was just beginning. The storm had cleared by dawn, but the sky still wore the weight of it. Low clouds, gray light, the kind of morning that felt hushed, like the world was holding its breath. I got to the office early, but not before him. His car was already parked out front. The lights in his office were on. He hadn't gone home, or if he hadn't slept. I could see it in his face, the quiet fire behind his eyes, the restraint of a man who wasn't going to raise his voice, but would raise the stakes. At exactly 8 a.m., he sent the message, "Mandatory meeting, conference room, now." They trickled in one by one, coffee cups in hand, nervous chatter, still oblivious. Some were laughing, nudging each other like it was just another Wednesday. One of them even smirked when he saw me. That smirk didn't last. Liam wasn't there. The CEO stood at the head of the table. He didn't sit, didn't greet anyone, just held up a remote and said, "Watch." The screen lit up with muted security footage, grainy but clear, time-stamped, unedited, just enough. We watched as one of them exaggerated a signing motion, mimicking Liam with cartoonish gestures. Laughter followed. Another joined in, tilting his head, mocking the way Liam tilted his to hear vibrations. A third pretended to misunderstand a sign and burst out laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. They thought they were clever. They thought they were safe. But the room now was silent. Dead silent. When the screen went black, no one moved. No one breathed. You could feel shame settle on their shoulders like a wet coat they couldn't shrug off. Then, finally, his voice. Calm. Measured. No rage. Just truth. "If you find it acceptable to mock a man for his silence," he paused, looked each of them in the eye, "then you've just lost the right to be heard here. You're fired. All of you." There were gasps. A chair scraped back. Someone opened their mouth to protest, but he raised his hand, not with anger, just finality. This company was built on respect. If you can't grasp that, you're not part of it. No yelling, no second chances. Just the quiet sound of consequences echoing through the room. He left before they did, walked past them without a glance, and I followed him. Not because he needed support, but because I needed to see what he would do next. He went straight to Liam's desk. It was empty, of course. He wasn't in yet. Maybe he was still deciding whether he even wanted to come back. And honestly, I wouldn't have blamed him if he didn't. The CEO reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. A small, folded paper crane. Smooth, white, crisp corners. The same kind Liam had given me. He placed it gently beside Liam's monitor. No note. No explanation. Just the gesture. A new symbol in place of what had been broken. Then he stood there for a moment, taking it in. The stillness, the empty chair, the quiet that now held meaning, not mockery. And just like that, something in the air shifted. The cruelty that once lingered there, gone, replaced by something softer, something honest. Not regret, exactly, but redemption. And in that silence, I realized something. Sometimes, the loudest acts of courage don't come with noise. They come with stillness, with clarity, with choosing what's right, even when it costs you. That evening, the office was quiet again. Not just from the storm being over, but from everything that had passed through it. I sat in my car for a long time before I could drive home, watching the streetlights flicker across the windshield, thinking about Liam, thinking about the silence I'd kept for too long, and the silence I finally broke. I pulled out my phone and typed slowly, unsure if the words were enough. He knows now. That's all I wrote. No big speeches, no apologies, just the truth. I wasn't sure if he'd respond. Part of me expected nothing. Maybe he'd shut it all out. The pain, the workplace, even me. But a few minutes later, a notification lit up my screen. It wasn't a text, it was a short video. I opened it with cautious fingers. The screen went black for a beat and then, there he was, Liam. Sitting in a room lit by soft lamplight, his face calm but not empty. And his hands began to move, slow, deliberate, clear. "Thank you," he signed, "for seeing me." That was it. Just that. And it said more than any words ever could. I sat there, holding my phone like it was something sacred. Not because I'd saved anyone, but because, in the quiet, I finally understood what it meant to show up. Really show up. Later that night, just before I fell asleep, I got one last message. It was from the CEO. 5 words. I should have been watching closer. Then another. I won't forget again. And that was the moment I knew something had shifted. Maybe not everything was healed. Maybe not everything could be. But something had cracked open, and through that crack, dignity had finally walked in. No dramatic music, no triumphant ending. Just the stillness of being seen, the quiet strength of being heard, and the bitter, beautiful truth that sometimes silence is the loudest cry for grace. Sometimes the loudest cruelty doesn't come with shouting. It comes hidden inside a laugh, a look, a shrug. It wears the mask of normalcy, and it slips past unnoticed day after day. And sometimes the deepest kind of kindness isn't loud either. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't ask for credit. It's in a hand gently signing thank you, in a paper crane placed beside a monitor, in a voice trembling but finally telling the truth. I've asked myself 100 times since then, was it too late? Did I wait too long to speak up? Or was it just late enough to matter? The truth is, I don't know. I wasn't the hero of this story. I was a bystander, just close enough to feel it, and just scared enough to stay quiet. Until I wasn't. But Liam, he was never asking for a savior. He wasn't asking for pity or attention. All he ever wanted was dignity. A seat at the table, the space to be exactly who he was without being mocked for it. That shouldn't be rare, but it still is. And maybe that's why stories like this matter. Not because they wrap up neatly, but because they don't. Because they ask us to sit with the discomfort, to feel the weight of our silence, to ask ourselves hard questions, the kind that don't come with easy answers. Would I have spoken up if I hadn't known the CEO? Would I have stood by Liam if it cost me something? Would you? You see, this wasn't about corporate policy, or office culture, or even consequences. It was about courage. The kind that whispers, do the right thing, even when it's late, even when it's hard, even when no one else does. So if you're watching this right now, ask yourself, where is your silence costing someone their dignity? And what would it take to finally speak? Pause, soft breath. This is Mr. Alex Stories, where we don't just tell stories to entertain, we tell them to remember who we are. If this story moved something in you, share it. Let someone else feel what you just felt. Subscribe if you believe empathy isn't weakness. It's the quiet strength that changes everything. And in the comments, tell me where you're watching from. Type 1 if stories like this mean something to you. Type 0 if they don't. I'll listen, either way. Because that's what this story was about. Listening, even when the world doesn't.